We're there. Organisations, that is the biggest challenge. How are things with you? Lovely to see you looking so well. How's things?
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, I made an effort today. Did my hair and that. We'll have a shave for once. Things are good. So I've got a diet that's working to help reduce long COVID symptoms. And yeah, I think I told you antihistamines seem to get rid of the symptoms. So anyone tuning in that knows anyone who's got long COVID, just basic over-the-counter allergy medicine seems to get rid of symptoms for a lot of people. So that's a bit of a game changer, to be honest. So yeah, happy days, mate. How are things with you?
Yeah, okay, thank you. We've had a cracking start to the year. I'm just going to tilt my camera so
I was about to say you're looking a bit,
yeah, looking vibrant. No, essentially, it's been a really encouraging start to the year. I think the biggest challenge now is around just trying to be a little bit smarter at the moment. We've had this conversation many times before, right? About parachuting yourself in every time we both love our sports, right? And so we talk about the football analogy when if something needs your attention or whatever, you tend to sub yourself on and try and score the winning goal. And actually, that's incredibly unscalable. And one thing I've tried to do since our last meeting, although disappointed to say I've regressed slightly, is that white space in the diary. Essentially, I've got too much. I was really good. I felt so empowered doing it, getting rid of those spaces. It's amazing that like the gaps fill themselves almost. And what I mean by that is, okay, so previously I had all of the diaries mapped, all the diary mapped out weeks in advance. Great. We then go make white space. But yeah, you're then just pulled into this meeting, pulled into that meeting, pulled into this, pulled into that. And because you're not having it pre-booked, you feel like there's no excuse to say, no, I can't come in. So yes, I will take this meeting with a moment's notice. Yes, I will come and join this call to see what's going on. And so far more involved in delivery, which has been interesting to see. And obviously that's typically an area where Fred and Martin look after. So it's been interesting to see how that goes and the processes have got in place. And on the line shed, fantastic. But I think for my specialism, my strengths as a kind of owner founder, they're not particularly necessarily in running a project end to end. They're more in looking after a customer in an account management capacity, or perhaps being out there winning new work, etc. So it's just trying to prioritize without leaving people feeling under supported. And I wonder how, again, everyone wanted the bit of Marcus back in the day. How did you overcome that so that you could say, you know what, Marcus isn't right to be on this call to talk with a client about their PPC execution, because actually that's not what Marcus does?
I mean, I still haven't. It's it's not a binary. You're either in the business and you're just doing that all the time, or you're out and you're like this sort of head CEO or director sitting above it all, and everything works perfectly. And you're pulled in and out. And in fairness, at the minute, I'm a lot more out than I was, being pulled in. I guess the white space idea, right? So people tuning in who didn't watch the last sort of session, is just to have white space in your diary. But the whole point of that is to slow down and is to give you room to not be reactive. Do you know what I mean? To take a second to respond and really decide, do you want to go in that? I mean, for us, actually, it's a case of sometimes turning around to the guys and saying, look, you don't need me here. I'm going to probably get in the way. Just, copy me into the actions, or just big them up, because they need to rise. And it ties in, actually segues nicely to what I was going to say towards the beginning of this call. Is I think where I see these sessions going, mate, in the next sort of 12 to 18 months or so, is we want to find peak Lomax. We want to give you space for you to be the best version of yourself. And I think in your email to me, which we can go through later, the actions from the last call, you called them magical moments of Lomax. But we all know what we mean by that. It's being in the zone. It's when everything seems to flow, where you're not feeling stressed. But if we, by having these conversations and you trying things and figuring out how to sort of create Lomax in the zone on a daily basis, if that's as far as we got, I'd consider this to be quite a failure, because actually the magic comes is when you can do that for the whole of the Quickfire team. So you can unleash the collective genius of Quickfire. And what you're talking about here is that thing of, rushing around, getting pulled into meetings like we all do. And then also, if you're rushing as well, you might not be your best self in the meeting. And there's a brilliant book, and of course I'm not going to recommend a book, but one that I keep going back to is Multipliers. Have you come across this?
No, I haven't.
Have you not?
No.
Lomax, this is your time. This is probably, the work you're doing yourself, and I'm doing it as well. Once you get to a place where you can actually have a bit more space and be responsive rather than reactive, this is the next stage. So this is Liz Wiseman. She did a massive study, I think 1,500 leaders in Silicon Valley, and she categorizes them into two types of leader. There's a multiplier who gets the most from each person that they lead, and there's diminishers who are just really talented and come in all stressed and just kind of just force people to work and just do that. So the point is the multipliers, from their teams, they get a multiple amount of output and they get their best from the teams. And the diminishers actually get only about half of the output of what the people can do, because they kind of don't like their job. They think their boss is a twat. They aren't really happy, so they're not doing their best work. And I think that's kind of where I see this journey that I'm on, and is you create the best version of yourself, and then you learn to get the best out of other people. And I think that ties in with the challenge you've got at the minute is, why are you having to step in? Purely because there's space, you're feeling like you should. But surely there's a level of, do I trust the guys? Have I given them enough sort of resource and support to get the best from them? And that'd be an interesting thing to explore today, mate, is just getting the most out of your team. The other thing I'd love to do actually at some point in this session is go through your
like I say, let's happily go through.
Should we start with that?
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Great. So I've got the email up from last time. So for people watching, there were 5 actions from the last session with Mr. Lomax. The first one, actually, no, I'm going to flip them around and go to the last one, because I really want to know the answer to this question. Yeah. So the 5th one was try to have another moment of Lomax magic. So did that happen? Did you have a moment where you thought,
I mean, so excited to share this with you. So essentially there's a challenge in the organization where we didn't have basically the process. If we look at the process through, there's probably 40 or 50 steps in the process. And actually one of the frustrations at the moment, or I guess I always compare agency life or business life to a bit like a game of whack-a-mole. And what I mean by that is you solve a problem over here and you think, oh, I've got the mole, fantastic. And then another bloody one pops up on the front lawn. You're like, no. So you go and put all your eggs and solve that one. And then another one pops up and you're like, oh my God, I can't keep these things down. Anyhow, the challenge in the last 6 weeks has been around the handover from kind of winning the project into delivery to make sure everyone's got what they need and there's no information missed, because sometimes you're having multiple conversations and are you getting absolutely everything detailed, and that then links into the quality of the spec and everything else. So going through that with the team, and actually it arises that actually there's another resource challenge with perhaps someone to help the onboarding guys to make sure that they've got what they need, so someone in the client services team, and then also another developer. And I know I already had earmarked this developer. We've talked before about recruitment pipelines, and I ran a great session with the agency cohorts the other day with Piers and actually Rebecca, where we talked about recruitment and recruitment pipelines. And so I already had this developer earmarked for a long time, but I didn't know if they would buy. And anyway, long story short, I managed to have a great conversation with him, and he's joined the organization for us initially part-time, and we'll see where it goes from there. But essentially, he's already hit the ground running and been a fantastic addition, and that's really exciting. And that all came about from me being in a good headspace where I could just think a little bit more strategically and say, you know what, I want this person. They can't necessarily. I tried initially for 5 days. They couldn't give 5 days. They didn't want to give 5 days. And I thought, actually, does it need to be 5 days? Or actually, could they be 2.5 days? As long as we get great quality output of that 2.5 days, is that still okay? And yes, it was. And actually, the proof's in the pudding. And I must say, the first 2 weeks, he's absolutely excelled. And so I've been over the moon with that. And then the second is in the client services, where, again, we needed someone, but I wanted someone with agency experience. We've talked many times before about those A players. And actually, a couple of the hires I've made recently, or we've made as an agency, have been people with more agency experience, people that have been there, seen it, done it, to complement the team. And actually, we've found this account services lady that we've got one joining in March, which I'm really excited about. But I've actually just taken on one that started this morning, who's going to be helping with those specs and everything else. And already she's been on a couple of calls with us this morning, been taking notes, been sending over follow-ups, been kind of just that next level of comms, which we really needed to stop that. Okay, did you say that? I can't remember. Did I write that down? No, it's not on my notes. I can't read my writing, etc. sometimes when you're in the heart of a conversation and you're having this discussion, sometimes it's very difficult to jot every single point down. And you could record it, you could get it transcribed or whatever, but actually just having that person on the call as well, just to sanity check things, was a real blessing in disguise. So two moments there where I felt like the hiring of both of those people, I was absolutely in peak Lomax. And what I mean by that is I was in a good place. I did think outside of the box, and I knew that this second individual in the client services, she's a wonderful lady, and just thinking about it creatively to say, you know what, she's got to work this around childcare. Could this work? Could this work? What about this package? How about that? Can we adjust that? Actually was yeah, me, my best self, and I'm being really chuffed with that.
So what happened for you to allow that best self to come through?
Interesting. It was both communications were at a weekend, and they were at a weekend when I wasn't being pulled from pillar to post, and had some time to just action something. So the developer was, like I said, I'd already had that relationship, so I could cut a lot of the initial chit chat and finding out about each other. I'd already qualified him to knew he was a good egg. It was just a case of, can I convince him to join and to support us? And the second was somebody actually reached out to via LinkedIn, and I was interested in her profile and what she'd said and her experience. And I just, yeah, thought, you know what? I mean, we've got some fantastic recruiter contacts, and we've worked very closely with the likes of R13 for a number of years, and I continue to be really impressed with the stuff that those guys do for us. But I just thought in this case, it was more of a, okay, I need something, I need it fairly urgent, and I need to find the right person. And I just went on that version of Discovery by myself, or on a Saturday, I went through a couple of profiles and I looked and I thought, actually, this had started having a chat with this lady. It's classic Norfolk. Everybody knows everyone. She knew quite a lot of my family already. And before we knew it, I said, okay, let's really impressed with you. However, it's not just my decision. There's two other co-founders. Let's get them in on a call on Friday. Had the call at 2:30. By 3, I'd had messages from both of them to say, can we offer her the job? To which we just said, yeah, you know what, this does fit exactly with what we need. And honestly, the moment we sent the message to say, we'd like to offer you the role, can you start Monday? There did feel like a real weight off our shoulders, and it felt like a real positive step forward. And then suddenly you end up working on Saturday or Sunday, and then it feels like a step back. So, I mean, one of the big questions for you today is, while I had glimpses of peak Lomax, and that was really refreshing, I'm also in a headspace where sometimes I get frustrated that I can't sometimes force peak Lomax, or I can't get those moments more often. And sometimes I feel like we're not going quick enough. So, you know me, I'm just like, I've had one peak Lomax, why can't I have 5? Like, why can't it just be peak Lomax all the time? And that's a massive frustration, and something I'm trying to overcome. Is I can't just turn it on like that. It has to have a or circumstances around it to bring out that best version.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And all you can do is control the circumstances, right? But the big thing that is universal is, you mentioned, look, these happened on weekends when I wasn't pulled from pillar to post, so when there was less going on. And I think that's what, and it goes back to the first goal of white space, and then the second goal of perhaps delegating, saying no, just being really careful with your time. Because the question I have is, say those conversations, those two now employees, happened on a weekend where you were being pulled from pillar to post and you were rushing around and you were adrenalizing in fight or flight. Would you have come up with especially with the guy that you wanted him for 5 days and you figured out
to get 3? Yeah, I think you're right. I think I probably wouldn't have necessarily had the headspace to think like laterally and just think, you know what, there is alternatives here. I would have been in that black and white mode of, and I think that's the biggest difference is when I'm rushing, I can only see black and white, or when I'm stressed, I can only see black and white. Yet when I've got time or got flexibility in my diary, that's when I can see color as well, and I can see that not every side is created equal. Okay, I could just flex this here, or what about this? And you can make better decisions. It comes back to the discipline, I guess, to make sure that you are robust with your diary to say, you know what, as much as I would love to catch up with that individual, that isn't right for me. Someone else has to have that catch up, and you can't keep parachuting in to do X or do Y to help others, because as much as it it may help short term. The only person that suffers long term is potentially myself.
And the business, because the thing I think is that, so let's actually look at hypothetical. Say, you were stressed, you're black and white, and you lost that guy. Over the next 3 or 4 years, what's the impact of that to Quickfire? I mean, assuming that he continues to be a great employee, and you lost both of these two really good A players. And then if you actually then go, well, hold on a second, we take this thought experiment and reverse it into the past. How many opportunities have you missed out on because you were stressed in the week? Because I think what the challenge is, the reason you're not disciplined is because you perhaps don't see the business value of slowing down. And I've had to struggle with this as well, especially when you're younger and in your 20s and you've got a shit ton of energy anyway. But I think the more you start seeing the truth of like, oh shit, that was lucky that I had those conversations on weekends where I wasn't stressed. But there's 5 days during every week where perhaps you are stressed and rushing around and you're not being as disciplined and you're missing out on insights. And that cost to Quickfire is fucking huge.
Yeah.
It's not just about your own well-being. I mean, that's what I want to look after first and foremost. But then as leaders, actually, if we're in our heads and we're adrenalized and we're just, not getting those insights and those clear ways of looking. I mean, there's another book, of course, I've got a few props. This one, Rob got this for me for my birthday a couple of years ago. $1 Billion Lessons. I mean, honestly, you want to cry when you read some of the figures of the mistakes people made. But the thing they've all got in common is there was conflict, there was stress, there was, actually Jim Collins talks about the 5 stages of decline, and people just getting up in their heads, getting stressed, not thinking clearly, not doing the things they know to do, trying something wild and taking a bigger risk or escalating arguments and all the rest of it. So actually it's really tough. It's fucking hard because we're in this hyper-stimulated world. There's so many distractions. But I think if we can start putting a cost on overworking and getting stressed, then we can actually get a real sort of sense of, fuck, this is actually costing my business a lot. Yeah. And then we can actually that should help motivate to get the discipline in. Me, at least it would, because I think, God, that's a very expensive fucking mistake. Yeah. There's all stuff that's missed, right? How many great thoughts have you not had because you've been stressed, Mr. Lomax?
This is it. And also I do find that at the moment I'm perhaps a little bit too emotional in certain situations. And so whether it be on calls with a team, we have these team building sessions kind of once a fortnight or once a month, typically once a month, but we've gone to once a fortnight to try and up it a bit and to start implementing some bits to try and improve everyone's kind of morale, work-life balance, all that good stuff. And actually the points I was raising, perhaps they were the right points, but actually the way I was raising them was far too emotionally charged. And that's because I'm always wearing my heart on my sleeve, but perhaps then that has the opportunity to come across in a different light, I guess, because I'm saying, look, if you want me to do X, then in return I need you to do Y. I need you to fill in your timesheets. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I need you to do all this good stuff. But actually, the way it came across just wasn't me. And as soon as someone, one of the guys actually just messaged afterwards to say, "I appreciate you. You're kind of stressed or whatever," and I was like, yeah, actually, you're right. I'm normally so much better than that. And that's the thing. Yeah. It's easy to be hard on yourself. You're like, no, I didn't deliver there. I wasn't on top performance. And yet we've had calls since where I've really delivered it and felt like it was a really positive conversation. But I've also had conversations where I thought, no, I've let myself down there. I haven't been my best self. I've got too emotional over something or bit back. If a team member or a client or whoever said something, I'm normally like, yeah, you're right, let me rationalize it, whatever. But a couple of times I've been like, no, and I've bit back, and that's not right either. And I think that comes down to, again, probably not enough white space, not time to react, and also just frustration simmering over. So I'd be keen to see how you've dealt with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, mate, good catch. Like most leaders in business, don't have that level of introspection that you have, because most people just say that employee pissed me off and that's on them, rather than saying, actually, I've been having really shitty conversations in my head and I've worked myself up and then I've overreacted to something someone said. And, also, even if you do feel the emotion rising, like something happened last week, with one of the guys, and and some emotion came up. And I went and spoke to Rebecca, and she goes, "You're emotional. Just believe it." And then within 20 minutes, I went upstairs and played with my son, and I had a completely different view of it. But had I sent them a message back then or pick up the phone, I wouldn't have been my best self, and I wouldn't have got the best thing out of them. And that's the great thing about this sort of personal development, is you become your best self and you help other people become their best selves, and also the business grows and you make money. But you have to take the road less traveled, which is the level of introspection. So mate, like, good catch. Like, the fact that you're observing that rather than saying it's the team are lucky to have a job. If they don't like it, they can go somewhere else. I mean, you hear these things from some people in business, and it's those are the diminishers that Liz Wiseman talks about in Multipliers. Those people lower the collective IQ in the room because they never take ownership for their bad emotional states. But you can't have peak performance from a bad emotional state. You can't outperform a bad emotional state. So you just need to, when you're feeling crap, just wait. It kind of goes away. Like every time you've been stressed, it went, right? You don't feel it now.
Yeah, all of these things are temporary emotions, right? I guess it's when you do identify that you've made a poor decision or led poorly or spoken poorly, it's, I guess, just working out the mechanism of how to deal with that, both internally but also externally. So do you apologize to that individual? Do you take accountability? Do you take some time to digest it and realize why? Or do you just put it down to a bad day? But there's definitely been some there where I think I'm just the thing is, once you kind of come out of that emotion, you look back and then you beat yourself up because you're like, for God's sake, like, I didn't need to behave like that. I didn't need to say that. I didn't need to think that. But by that time, the ship sailed, right? You've already said certain things. You've already done certain things that have kind of passed. So yeah,
you can always, the thing is, you can always go back and talk to people and just be a bit vulnerable. Like Brené Brown talks a lot about that, the power of vulnerability, and just say, look, I was having a really crap day and I'm sorry I took it out on you. I really respect you. I really want to, support you to be the best you can be at your job. And I'm sorry I took it out on you. And they'll probably be gracious and be fine with that. It's all quite simple, really, because actually when you settle down and you're actually more relaxed and you fall back into peak Lomax, then the solution to that question you just posed, which was, well, what do? How do I solve this conflict? Well, each conflict's unique, and the 4 different options you gave of just leave it and move on, or go and apologize, or whatever, like, you'll know the right one for that situation when you're not in a shitty mood.
Well, and that's the thing as well, right? Is that the process of us just discussing this now and having a mentor or these mentoring sessions allows you just to think about that almost from bird's eye view, and then go, I've just written here, call 2 individuals and apologize for how I came across last week. Because also, just because I didn't mean it to come across like that, if it came across like that, whether I meant it or not, then it was fundamentally wrong, right? And it's something that I didn't do right. So I think that's definitely an action that I need to take. I need to contact those 2 people in the team and just say, look, I'm sorry if it came across like this. This isn't how it was intended. What I meant was X, but at the same time, I was in the wrong, and I'm sorry. I think the other thing is just go on. Go on.
I'm trying, because it's really good. Try being so vulnerable that it feels uncomfortable. And then just see how that lands. It might not be right for the personality type. So again, this is just a suggestion that you may want to try at some point, but literally just say, here's what was going on for me that day. I was worrying about something. I was scared of getting COVID. I was stressed about this or that. And I really had these crappy internal conversations, and I wasn't in a great place. And I'm so sorry, because I respect you and I completely didn't turn up as my best self. And just do it in a way that perhaps, because I think what you don't want is obviously them feeling like it's a half apology, or it's or they tuned in and watched this. And but if you're vulnerable, you connect to the human level. I think that's it with relationships. You want to connect, and the vulnerability piece. Just if you're brave enough to drop the mask and say, look, I was feeling scared and worried, and I was stressed and fucked up, they're more likely to respond in a way which is you can then have a nice moment of connection that is real rather than something that feels artificial. But just something to try. Just give it I find it difficult as well. I think Rebecca says that it's like, you're not being vulnerable if it feels comfortable saying it. Whereas at that moment before you open your mouth, if you think, God, I'm actually going to say this, you then know that you're pushing your comfort zone. So that's cool.
Just on that exact note, there's a topic I want to discuss here around growing
Yeah.
fast enough. And one thing I've been really toying about, it's funny because we have these conversations, and for the large part of it, I forget we're even live, right? I just feel like it's
Yeah,
you
me
and
too,
me having a
actually.
coffee, and I'm like, oh my God, I've just shared that with the world. That wasn't great. But the one I do want to talk about, and I'm sharing it because I think other people might occasionally feel the same, and hopefully the solution will help others. But it's just around the feel of not growing fast enough and not going and growing fast enough. And there's, again, we've had this debate many times before, and it's something that constantly eats away when you do turn the laptop off of an evening, whether it be 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, and you just feel like, but I could always do more. I could do more emails. I could clear my inbox a bit further. I could do this. I could send this. I could those kind of day-to-day tasks. But then also in the bigger picture, great, we've hit this, but I want to be there, or I'm not there, or I can't live this type of life because I haven't quite got there, or whatever. It's how do you overcome that? Like, there is no substitute for time, but at the same time, sometimes it's very difficult to realize that, and you're just like, look, I need to be doing more. We need to be pushing harder. We need to be taking on more people. We need to be taking on more projects. We need to be pushing the boundaries even further.
Yeah. I mean, have you overcome it in the past? Just throwing it back at you, because I can tell you my strategies.
Yeah. I think in
like,
the
have you
past,
overcome it? What happened when you had those
typically
thoughts and they go?
it's been getting perspective. So I've probably talked to someone about it, and they've just said, look, essentially, it's all well and good wanting to go here, but just think about what you've got now, and what you've got now is miles from where you once were, and what you've got now actually isn't so bad. And compare yourself to rather than comparing yourself to people over there, compare yourself to people over there, and actually those people have barely got running water and a roof over their heads,
Yeah.
etc. And that is absolutely 9 times out of 10 really helpful. I would say the 1 times out of 10 it isn't helpful is when you still get those internal thoughts or feelings that go, yeah, that's great, but you're not in that situation, and you understand that you're not in there, and you are massively grateful for those certain things, but it doesn't stop you wanting to push further. It doesn't want you to stop running faster, or to say, yeah, you can do this or you can do that, or great, you've won a 50k project, now you want a 70k project, or great, you've delivered that project, but you want it to be delivered better, or great that client is converting at 2%, but you want them to convert at 3%, or whatever it may be. It's a real internal challenge about being happy with what's been done versus always wanting the next thing, which also is quite difficult for a team as well. If they've just built something that they're really happy with, and I go, yes, fantastic, but what about that? Or can you not add that? Or how about this? Or why don't we have that function or something? I guess that's quite demoralizing as well.
Yeah, I mean, the solution that, and I think there's some truths, right? The fact is, everyone has these thoughts in business. If you are someone who wants to achieve things in the world, then you're going to have these thoughts. It's never going to be enough. I watched The Last Dance again with Michael Jordan. He was always pushing. Like, it's absolutely brilliant documentary, but and that's why he's so great. But he never felt like he'd arrived. Even after the 6 championships, he wanted to go for a 7th, and it didn't work out because of the management, etc. But the solution is just don't take that thought so seriously. Just just laugh at yourself. Just, there I go again. And I think for me the counter side of it was, well, if I don't have these thoughts, then I'm going to become lazy, and I'm going to just not focus. I'm not going to drive. That's bullshit, because like this drive that we both naturally have and people in business have, that's got us here today. That's not going to disappear. But like, in some ways it's a good feeling when you feel like, yeah, I'm excited, I want to go and do stuff. And then there are moments where you expect it to be hitting this target and you drop back a bit. But the only way out is just to not take that thought so seriously, because you're just reacting to the thoughts. You've made up this story and the parameters in your head, and you can just let it go a little bit. And it is still important. It's important to you, don't get me wrong. But if you find yourself feeling shit about those thoughts, then just don't take them so seriously. Just take a break and just accept that sometimes you're going to feel like that. That's part of the game. I'm sure Lionel Messi sometimes think, or Cristiano Ronaldo, like, they're going to have, like, we all have it, right? If you want to achieve something, you're going to have senses of, I'm not going as far as I could be, or my competitors are doing better, or whatever. But I think just try not to get as upset about the thoughts, because they're going to keep coming. I think your original question was, how do I get over that? that implies that you've got over it and you're never going to have it again. I just don't think that's true. I think the only way you can
learning to live with it, I guess, rather than trying to stop it.
Yeah, but live with it in a way where it just becomes less of a problem, because I'm sure, the things you were worried about 10 years ago don't worry you now, right? How old were you then? 16, 15?
Yeah, 16.
Right. So the things that worry you now, in 10 years' time, you're not going to be worried. You're going to have different challenges, right? But just accepting that's part of life, and don't get too worked up about it. You can't just turn it off. It's not an off switch. But I think perhaps accepting that it's your greatest strength as well, your drive. But if it starts making you feel bad, then just take a break, because you're just getting caught up in your thinking, nothing else. If you were lazy and it was true that you're not doing enough and you're failing, you'd see that in a failed business and just you working by yourself, struggling to pay the bills, and you have something very far away from that. But it's cool. Like I have that. I get annoyed. We're competitive as well, but it's just learning to not take these thoughts so seriously. For me, that's the only way to just get some form of sanity and serenity in a difficult business environment. I don't know if that's helpful.
Massively. Well, no, I think it is. And the thing around competitiveness is an interesting one, because even now, when I was a child and Man United would lose, I would genuinely get quite upset and quite emotional and probably cry. And I've managed to get to the stage where I'm not quite crying when they lose, but I do honestly have when they equalised at the weekend, Everton, no word of a lie, I'm abusing the goalkeeper through the telly screen. I'm chucking cushions around that. I am still massively emotionally charged by that kind of thing. And that's no different in work, where I really do live this kind of heart on sleeve roller coaster life, where I have the most amazing peaks, but then the most amazing troughs where I'm like, oh my God, I can't see past today. I don't know what's going to happen. Life's so bad, versus, oh, life's just amazing. I'm untouchable. This is incredible. And it's such a strange way of living. And like I said, it makes the high so high, but by God, does it make the low so low as well?
But it sounds like a fucking fun roller coaster, mate. I'd rather be on your roller coaster than the monorail. You know what I mean? Like, definitely. Like, and that's who you are. Like, some people, you didn't get a job. No disrespect to people at the council. I used to be a councillor, but in the public sector, pushing paper. Really safe job. You didn't become an accountant. Like, that's just. But I mean, like, you chose to go into business because you are that. You do love the thrill of the chase, but you've got to. You've got to deal with the drawbacks of the game, which is the highs and the lows and more. But then those moments of the highs, I'm sure you could rattle off like 5 or 6 different memories of your best moments in business, and they're fucking brilliant, and you wouldn't trade them for the world. So I think the trick is just to be gracious in your low moods and know it will pass, because it always does. Like, you're laughing about, that Dominic Calvert-Lewin equaliser today.
Don't remind me.
When you're stressed tonight and you're like, oh, we just lost that contract, and we're not where we should be, and we're so much smaller than blah blah blah. You just go, look, this is my toddler tantrum, right? This is me throwing my cushions around the room when he equalises, and I'm going to laugh on it. I'll be laughing at it probably in the next 24 hours, and it just gives you some perspective. That's all it is, right? But enjoy the ride, mate. Like, the Stoics say that, like, you're alive, right? And being alive means you feel shit emotions. But I'd rather feel shit emotions and be alive than be dead. I know it sounds really stupid, but the Stoics said that, amor farte, not just to bear what happens to you, but to fucking love it. Like, wicked. This is a really shit setback, but this is the moment I'm going to turn it around and go back up the roller coaster. You just wait. So just,
So back on our email thing that we sent over, we went through point 5. What else did we have on there for us to work through and tick off?
This ties in beautifully to kind of what we're saying about enjoying life and putting things in perspective. You had your spiritual self-care list. So, I mean, so the question I'm going to ask you now, mate, is on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at the minute? Not like right now, because we're having a nice conversation, but say in the last week, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, it's been poor, if I'm perfectly honest. I'm finding that I'm doing too much, and I'm not giving my family around me the time. I don't know. For example, as some of you know, like, essentially, I'm in a relationship with someone I think an awful lot of, and she's got a family, and I'm trying to be part of that, and that's all really exciting. But it's things like the homeschooling, right? I'm in this room 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, and sometimes it's funny, we kind of had dinner together and we're like, like, how was your day? As if we've not even been here, right? We're literally 2 seconds from each other. But I honestly don't leave this room to get a drink, to get anything to eat, whatever. like don't leave it because I'm normally back to back, and therefore I just feel at the moment like I don't know. I can't do these things. For example, it's snowing outside. It looks absolutely beautiful. Like the idea I had when I started the business is that you know what? At 12:30 today, if I want to, I'll go and build a snowman with the
Yeah.
other half's daughter. We'll build a snowman, and I'll come back in at 1:30, and we'll deal with stuff then. But actually, that's so far from the reality because if I go out at 12:30, I'll miss my 12:30 call. I'll miss my 1 o'clock call. I'll miss my 1:15 call. That those things can't happen. And so I guess recently I've been in a bit of a low mood. I think also that the whole like COVID situation of lockdown three that really did begin. I don't know. I've been so positive through lockdown one, lockdown two. I was fairly positive. Start of the year, I saw some negative posts, and I was like, no, I'm going to champion positivity and not to go
Mm.
with these memes, etc. And then I think it did just really hit me on a train. I was like, you know what, this is really shit. Like I do just want to go out now and see my family and see my friends and do these nice things and go out for dinner and do all those things we used to love about old life, like the novelty of being at home and not doing these things, it really is kind of coming to bear. And so, yeah, I think all in all, recently I haven't been that
Yeah.
tip top, and I do feel like I'm drowning at times. But at the same time, there's been some great things as well.
Mate, I think like the reason I said good when you said it's been bad is that it's good you're being open and vulnerable about what the things, and you know, like let me just quickly run through your spiritual self care
Yeah, go
list.
for it.
The reason we do this, we made this list, is that it's something that my mum, who's a CBT therapist, and I think she got this from Michael Neal, in fairness, but every time I ring her up and she goes, "Oh, you don't sound very happy," I'm like, "No, this has happened and I'm in a bad mood," and she goes, "Okay, well, what have you been doing for self care?" And it's like nothing, right? So the list you've got, mate, is number one: get up when ready to wake up, not when alarm says I have to. Exercise and fresh air. Watch or play sport. Talk to friends. Spend time with family. Eat 3 meals, albeit healthy. Take quiet times to reflect. Talk to someone either on the journey or some stage ahead. So do mentoring, plus equals minus. Stretch and do yoga. Read, watch, or learn something new. In the last week, how much of any of those have you done?
Three, I would say. Watching sport, I am really fortunate that the
Yeah.
family here just kind of give me that they know that if Man United are playing, and we're fortunate at the moment, right? They're playing twice a week, and sometimes Norwich are on telly as well. So I do at least get two times a week where I'm watching Man United and on that kind of
Mm.
roller coaster, and that I really love. I think the eating thing again, I'm incredibly fortunate. Nikki's a wonderful cook, and we normally have three fantastic meals. Sometimes I'm a little bit slack with breakfast, but certainly lunch and dinner we've always got great meals, and that's fantastic. I think the piece about watching and learning, we did actually sit down last night and watch a documentary called The Fall, and I was or like a series called The Fall, and I was really enjoying that. Um, and we do get time to watch the odd thing now and then. I think that the bit about exercise, I started trying to do some runs. I did 2 runs last week, and I felt amazing once I'd done them. The thought about doing it, the weather outside, etc., was hugely off-putting. But when I did them, I felt great. But I think the other pieces in there around getting some quiet space, getting up when you want to get up. Last week I was up at 6 almost every morning, and had to be because I wanted to start work by 5 past and come down in the dressing gown, get a few hours done, go up, have a shower, etc. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, certain bits of that I feel like I'm doing really well, particularly watching sport. I mean, the family thing is massive, and while I rarely say this, I do really miss them. Right, I was at boarding school, I went traveling, I had massive periods of time where I wasn't with my family, and that was fine. But yeah, of course, I start to miss them. I guess it's the fact that in all those opportunities, if you really wanted to, you could go and see them, and actually now you can't go and see them, and that is difficult. But yeah, all in all, I think probably like 4 or 5 of those I'm doing okay on. 4 or 5 of those I'm just way off. And if I'm honest, it's because I'm not being holding myself account enough and trying to tick off each of those things. Like again, even if it's just a Zoom call with the family or whatever, I do WhatsApp
Yeah.
them now and then and speak to them, and that's okay. But I don't. I would love to just go and spend an afternoon with them or have dinner with them or whatever. Um, and they always say, right, you don't know what you've got until you haven't got it. And I obviously really sadly lost my grandmother in September. I was incredibly close to her, and I don't think I've had a day where I haven't thought about that. I just keep thinking to myself, oh, I wonder what we'd be doing. Like, it'd be great to see her. I'd love to talk to her about this, etc. And that kind of grief process sets in after a while. But I think mainly just, yeah, I think sometimes I'm so immersed in this work life that I sometimes don't see the life going on around me, and I'm just like, my friends, another one. When was the last time I caught up with my friends and admittedly you can't do anything or play golf, whatever, but even just had a call with them. I've caught up with Moki and Blackers a bit, but actually some of the others I haven't spoke to in weeks. And yeah, there's an argument to say, well, they could have spoke to you, but also there's no reason why I can't reach out to them and see how they are. And I used to be very good at that, but I've got really poor recently. I've almost like cocooned, if you like.
You know what, mate? It's so interesting. You know, humans are so simple. You know, a good friend of mine, a guy called Derek Barkham's a CBT therapist locally, and he just said, you know, you go back to the fundamentals, and most people, you know, flourish. And I think what's interesting is I remember the first week after you sent me that list, you had a white space. You're sending me the white space.
Yeah.
And you were filling that white space because you were settled down and slowed down with things like catching up with friends and family and all the rest of it. So look, I'm willing to put money on if you after this call, if you just took a bit of time or whenever you can, to figure out how you can get that white space back. And then the thing about the checklist, it shouldn't be tyrannical. It shouldn't be this thing I have to check off everything. But the truth is, you've out of the 10 things on the self-care checklist, you've kind of done 3, and one of them is eating food. You know, the other one's watching sport. And cricket aside, it's been a pretty diabolical weekend of sport. You know, so
absolutely.
Sport for me is a lottery, right? Because if Norwich win and England win in the rugby,
I was going to say England losing the rugby, United, Norwich, like it was a car crash of a weekend. And then England this morning, I was like, oh great, I can't wait to switch on the cricket and see how we got on overnight. And I realised that we're like 72 for 4. Now, admittedly, we're doing okay, and I think we'll be all right. But I think apart from the cricket, we're in a bit of a shocking weekend, really.
It kind of goes back to look. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I think we just need to keep doing this until you've kind of like you've had a month where you have created the space in your diary, and then on different days you just see what comes up. You don't overplan, right? If you feel like calling an old school friend and reminiscing on the naughty stuff you got up to, do it, right? Or you feel like calling your parents, or do you know what I mean? Like, or just having quiet time reflecting. Like, it's easier to do those things when you do have more space in the diary and you are just have a bit more discipline with Quickfire, and you are becoming more of a multiplier. You're bringing the guys up. And look, of course, there's going to be days where like, I just can't do it, Marcus. I've got to do 2 20-hour days. Like, can't sleep. And that obviously is the cross we bear in business. But I'm confident that the more you start taking this really seriously, like the better it will be for business as well. Because if I meant like white space and like just mess around for the sake of being lazy, then that might have an impact on Quickfire. But from what you said at the beginning of this conversation, the 2 best bits of business you did were over the weekends when you weren't stressed, you weren't hurried, and you had some really good insights. Now imagine if you could do that every day and also have the spiritual self-care list checked off. And that is possible, but it just requires a bit of space to actually stop being reactive and start being responsive. And that's a big distinction. You can choose to respond, choose consciously, rather than just knee-jerk emotion come up, blah, run after this person, reply to that, blah, blah, and you're just a reactive fucking emotional mess because you won't be your best self. And then you've got to waste time calling up people and apologizing. And, you know, it's a false economy, mate. So I'm trying to say you can have your cake and eat it, but I kind of wonder, in the last week, had you had white space and had you done those majority of those spiritual self-care things, would you have replied the last week's been as naff?
Well, exactly right. And actually, it's around prioritization. And as my always says, you can prioritize work, yet you can't prioritize exercise or your health or eating or whatever. Like, how does that work? I'm more than happy to prioritize back-to-back calls every 30 minutes, but I'm not more than happy to prioritize spending half an hour in the gym or taking half an hour to get some exercise or some fresh air. Like, sometimes you go 2 or 3 days without physically leaving the house and getting any fresh air. Like, that's not a healthy way to live your life. But at the same time, it sometimes feels necessary. But I think also, I don't know, once you get into the a better mindset, you can take a step back and go, you know what, that's ridiculous. I can just walk around the garden or whatever, like no stress. But then sometimes you think, no, I can't. I'm in it. I've got to just bang, 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 bang. We'll rest at the end of the day, and before you know it, 5:30 becomes 6:30, becomes 7:30, becomes 8:30. It's 10 o'clock. You still got stuff to do. So
I
yeah,
guess
I think yeah, go on.
the question is the bang, 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 bang. If you're not bringing your best self to those calls, how much money is that costing Quickfire?
Yeah, and again, there's no reason why certain other people can't necessarily do those calls. Some of it is around, like we said earlier, about just subbing ourselves on and just trying to just going straight up front and being like, look, we're just going to try and score the winner. And some of it is maybe not having enough faith in those around us. Like we've got a wonderful team and we're really working on getting some real A players. And I'm really, for the first time in a very long time, really pleased with the makeup of the team and think we're in a really good space with that.
Yeah.
But now it's the kind of crux of that is to step away and to let others kind of do their thing and not to suffocate them. And that's something I'm very guilty of. It's always got to be the Nathan show, and it doesn't need to be like that.
Exactly, and mate, just that's why I'm gonna give you an action. Just get on this book. It's on Audible as well. The narration's a little bit boring, to be frank, but you know,
That's half affordable for me. I just find the
I
narration
know.
dull.
Why can I have better intonation? I don't know, but like yeah, when you're doing your walks around the garden, just listen to this on Audible. Like this will help you. And I'm getting all my senior, like my senior leadership team, although we're non-hierarchical, so the agency growth team, to listen to this. And some people have like said, actually, I've never thought about being a multiplier. And like some of the quotes in here are amazing. Like one of them I read the other day was, being a leader is putting other people on stage. And the thing is, you are, to get to where you are, mate, is brilliant. But you've been the one on stage. But now your job is to be the director and put the other people on stage and give them the support and the guidance they need to be the best versions of themselves. So basically, you're being a multiplier. If everyone at Quickfire was twice as effective and twice as productive as they are now, it'd be so much easier for you to get the space. But the irony is, you need to have the space to have the mindset to get them to be doubly as productive. So you need to start with you and creating the space. And there will be a bit back and forth.
No, I totally buy into that, actually. And I do think there's a massive thing to be said around if you are not running back to back and not having to send Slacks or WhatsApps within the 3-minute gap between calls or whatever, then you probably could make better decisions and allow. But at the moment, it feels like, so this morning, for example, I had to miss 2 or 3 meetings I had booked because I had to be on another call. And I just think actually if I'd thought about it logically, my marketing manager is wonderful, Nima. She could have had those calls anyway without me. I didn't need to be on them, and I only when I'm on those calls, I do most of the talking anyway and take away the opportunity for others to necessarily have their say. So it's a bit like sometimes swimming at the deep end and just going, you know what, just like you can do that call. You're more than capable of doing it. Go and do it and see how you get on. And what's the worst that can happen? But yeah, I do. That's definitely an action I need to take before our next session is to just try and I guess promote others and get them on stage rather than just myself.
I think that's it. I was trying to find, there's a quote in here, but it's there's a CEO of a company, and they did like a massive survey of all the employees, and they said, yeah, well, when she comes on the call, she does most of the talking. So we enjoy that. Yeah. At first they were like put out, like, oh, well, I won't contribute much because the CEO always talks. And they thought, actually, this is why I can mess around on my phone or whatever. Like, you're underutilizing resource because you're the one doing all the talking. And actually, also, they're not growing at that point. You need to kind of, give them space for them to grow.
There's a fine line actually between speaking too much and allowing enough space. And what I mean by that is every Monday morning, we have a 8:30 to 9 o'clock call, and you go on there and no one's talking and it's quiet, and then all of a sudden it takes somebody to say, "Hey X, what did you do at the weekend?" And we go around and ask everyone what they did. But I'm also starting to think, well, does that person need to be me that leads those sessions to say, "Hey Matt, what did you do at the weekend? Hey, Billy, what did you do at the weekend?" Or actually, can it be one of the team to say, you know what, you're going to lead it this week, and you ask people what they did, and we can all still listen, but it doesn't need to be my voice all the time.
No, I think that's what you start experimenting with, right? It's just letting people, like, I haven't done a Monday morning kickoff, well, for probably 3 or 4 years. Now, Rebecca does take it when Alice normally does it, but Alice has done it, and I think a couple of other, I think Gareth's done it, Dave's done it. So these are all people in our agency growth team. And actually, the first times they do it, perhaps, they leave out something or whatever. But if it's an internal piece, it's kind of what I'm trying to say is if it doesn't go perfectly, that's kind of okay. And then you can save yourself for the cup finals, right? Where you do need to come in. But even then, like we've let we've let people take very senior sort of things that perhaps a director would have done, and the first time they've done it, they haven't done as well as us, and that's been really painful. But then they've upped their game, and I think the trick is in leadership is just being able to let people make mistakes, but not ones that's going to sink the whole ship. Failure that steers you rather than sinks you, and it's difficult, and that's a judgment call. And again, more white space gives you more clarity of mind to actually make those judgment calls. So my final question really is just, after our last session, you were able to probably for about 2 weeks get a lot of white space because you emailed it to me. What was the difference between then and the last couple of weeks?
I think then I was able to react to certain things. And so, for example, if then somebody said, Nathan, can you help me here? Can you jump on this? Can you do this? I absolutely could, and I could give it the best of my ability. Right now, it's anytime someone says, can you jump on it? It's always yes at the opportunity cost of X, a meeting that's been booked in for 3 or 4 weeks, a partner call that I was meant to have. One of the things I mentioned in my diary I really love is speaking to either conversations like this or people that have been there, seen it, done it. And that's really dried out. I went from having 400 calls a month in kind of lockdown 1 or 2, which I get was excessive, to almost having none, right? Because I'm kind of into a different area of the business at the moment where I'm focusing on helping with delivery or improving process X or process Y or whatever. And I miss that. I miss that interaction. I'm a sociable beast, and I enjoy the idea of chatting to other people and finding out their frustrations, etc. And sometimes you don't get that with when you're dealing so much internally. But I think in summary, I think the main thing was that I was just able to help and give support when I had free space. But right now, it always is okay. If I want to give help or support, I have to get up at 6 in the morning, or I have to go to bed at 1 in the morning to be able to do that. And that then has a knock-on effect to home life and everything else. So I think the big thing is really just getting a rocket up my arse when it comes to the free space to say no, you need to take those free spaces. And I will absolutely today just go through the diary in the next 2 weeks and say I'm really sorry, but I can't have that call or I can't do that particular meeting because I need to have more flexibility in my diary to be able to lead the business as opposed to just almost. I did find sometimes with no free space, I feel employed versus employee, if that makes sense, or employer. So I'm just like, okay, I'm almost in a role where I'm 9 to 5 and I'm on cool, as opposed to having free space to be able to pivot and jump on things and steer things. I'm too can't see the bigger picture because I'm actually too ingrained in the day to day, and that again comes through time and taking a step back and then find someone else to substitute in.
So what are you going to do different from last time? Because last time you did that you booked out white space in 2 weeks, and then you didn't book out the then after the 2 weeks elapsed, 2 more weeks came and it got filled up again. So what are you going to do different from last?
I think the trick is the habit isn't necessarily white space, and what I mean by that is I block it in red, but the red is immovable because I look at the diary right and I still feel like I had a massive. I think the one thing with the white space is I felt guilty. I felt guilty that other people had more space as well. I've kind of always prided myself on having the busiest diary between the 3 directors, so that I could always be like, you know what, I can absolutely hand on heart know I'm busting a gut and delivering absolutely 110% of value for the organization. I think this time by putting it in, it's a tiny little thing, by blocking it in red. So, for example, end of this month, I started this last night. From the 24th to the 26th, it's all red, but it's red that says keep free. So
Perfect.
it's not like meetings and stuff. And there's the odd thing in there, but at the same time, it's got no opportunity for anyone to book anything in. And I think that's the trick is having keep free days that are blocked in red, but they're in red, which means it can't be booked. And then I can do what I want without thinking, okay, there's gaps. So someone then can jump in and fill it in because they can see that I'm busy. The other thing I did as well is since we last spoke, I did book 2 days holiday and
Brilliant.
rather disappointingly didn't take them. and I didn't take them. But what it did do is, by having it in the diary, it meant I had no meetings, which meant in those 2 days I could actually do what I wanted to do. So it achieved the white space for me, but it didn't allow me to switch off from the business entirely. And it was difficult because I was like, you know what, well, even if we did have a day off, what on earth would we do with it? It's not like we can go to the beach or go for a walk. We could probably go for a walk, but we couldn't do much else. So I did end up working, and I felt better for it. But I was working on what I wanted to work on and clearing the decks, as opposed to working what I felt like I had to be working on. And so just blocking out those chunks, if you like, even if it's days in a week, and Mondays and Fridays are those days, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever it may be, just getting at least a day a week where it is no meeting days, where you can just focus on the stuff you want to do, I think would be a really positive step forwards.
No, I think that sounds great, man. Like all of this thing, let's test it, and then we'll catch up in a month and see, because it all starts with the white space, or all the time blocked out. Because when you slow down, you'll have bigger insights, and it's a tricky one, because we judge our staff on the time they bill and what they do. But the truth is, when it's your own business, you're always working to a greater or lesser extent. I might wake up at 3 a.m. with some ideas about fountain, and I'll write them down on my pad next to my bed. I'm on holiday, I'm on the beach, and I'm stopping, getting regular, like, give me my phone out of your bag, right? I need to kind of write down some ideas I've had. So you're going for a run or whatever. Like, so we're never truly switched off in the way that most people who have a job can do. So actually, we need to really slow down and just not, like, that whole adage of it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. I think that's wrong. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I think that's wrong. It's not even a fucking marathon. It's like a walk across Europe over 10 years. Like, I'm walking to Beijing, right? And it's very slow, very sort of methodical. And if we try running on like a 10-year journey, then you're going to start burning yourself out, and you won't be able to respond to the longer part of it. But that all sounds positive. The only thing I'd say on holidays, mate, and this is one from our good mentor, Spencer Gallagher, he always books out his holidays 18 months in advance.
Yeah.
So he knows. So him and Pete always make sure. And Simon Roddis, who's of Sold Agency now, he was previously Solid Block, he did that because I'm sure he won't mind me saying, he had some health challenges around sort of overworking. And he realized that actually every 3 months he had to take at least 1 or 2 weeks off. So every quarter there would be a holiday in. And so I quite like that, meeting our people in agency world and business who are just, because I made the same mistakes you do. It's like, I'll book it like a month in advance, and then you end up not taking it because it's busy. Whereas if it's been booked months and months or a year in advance, you just know it's happening. But I think that's it. So, mate, it goes back to the fundamentals. Like the last 2 on your 5 things were, well, the last 3 were try and exercise more. So that ties into the self-care. Yeah. USP. So what's your USP? So that, I mean, did anything, you said we'll sit on this and see if anything comes. Did any insights come?
Not overly. I mean, we're pushing hard to get our Shopify Plus partnership together, and actually we're having some interesting conversations and getting more and more leads regarding Shopify Plus. So that might be a point of difference. It doesn't differentiate us from when we get to the next stage in terms of now you're in a different ball, but it does segment us slightly, right? To say, okay, out of all these e-commerce agencies, you are Shopify Plus. Okay, so now you go into a group of 100 agencies. Now what's a USP at that stage to get you to the next stage? Well, that's something we'll look at. But certainly to start with, I think Shopify Plus accreditation and partnership would be a massive step forward if we can get there.
Great. And obviously, the more space you have, the more time you're going to have for the insights to start working that out. Just as a side note, I started reading a book yesterday called Never Lose a Customer. I forget the author. But the process seems to me to kind of look at what your competitors do, so what the industry standard is, and then what something that would exceed the customer's expectation at each interaction would be. And I quite like that process. You could do that with just also your offering, how you interact with them and how you sort of present yourself and position yourself is how can you exceed the expectations of what the competition are doing. Finally, do you remember what number 1 was in your 5 things?
I've got no idea.
Well, we've mentioned it a lot today. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it just to twist the knife. Number 1, space in the diary. In brackets. Sent some screenshots about this. Started clearing this out this morning. Weirdly exciting. Feels like a real business maturity moment. And I'm pumped to think what can be achieved with more space. crazy is the only thing that's holding me back is me.
And actually, we're still there.
No. This is a part of the process, my friend. This is part of the process. Look, and we all have it. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think the more we can, I think the truth is you need to see the value of the space, because if it can make you happier, but also make Quickfire grow bigger and make a lot more money, and then also help improve the lives of the people around you, well, fuck me, that's definitely a mass ROI in getting this piece done. If it was just a bit of white space so you could catch up on some sleep and watch TV and not improve anything else, then it's less of a, you need to see it as the big ROI piece that it is. Chris Reeve, Mr. Revo, who does Social Media Fountain, sent me a message this morning saying, tell Nathan at the end to read out the comments, and like we did last time, just so we don't forget. So
I've got a comment here from Jack, which was, have you been busier in lockdown, Nathan, Marcus? And answer to that, yes. I mean, we were very fortunate that we decided to focus on e-commerce as opposed. We were at a crossroads pre-lockdown around, do we focus on hospitality or e-commerce? And I was in two minds, and having spent a lot of my life in hospitality, that seemed like a logical route to go down. However, for whatever reason, we decided to focus on e-commerce and Shopify Plus, and that was going to be our path. And sure enough, obviously, e-commerce has boomed in this time, and it's caused us to be incredibly busy, and that's been great. Jack, would I say I've been the right type of busy? And what I mean by that is sometimes it's easy to be busy, and I can fill a diary no problem. And as we've talked about at length today, that's the easy part. The hard bit is being productive or being smart busy, and that's something I continue to not quite get right. And that's why I put so much value in these kind of sessions, because it does give you a reality check and a chance to look at it. Like, if not, I'd just be on client calls and I would never look at this stuff. So yes, we've been busier, but have we been the right busy? To be decided.
Yeah, I'd say it's the same for us, really. I think some services are in more demand than others. So, a lot more demand for SEO. So we're growing that department, a bit less for some of the other services we offer. The thing we've noticed is there's been a lot of projects pushed back a bit, or just, I think with lockdown 3 happening in January, a few people that wanted to go all guns blazing in January said, oh, let's push it to March and so on. But I think people are a bit more careful with money. I think they're a bit slower to spend, but it hasn't been a drop off the cliff that, we saw in March. So I don't know if that answers the question well enough, but we're still doing okay in business, I guess.
Mate, conscious that you and I could chat forever, and it's our hour is up, but it's always so lovely to catch up. Thank you as ever for your infinite wisdom. I've got yet another page of notes, which I will try to decipher. Yeah, which I will email over. But mate, massive thank you. Lovely to see you as always. Take care. And for those that are listening, I hope you can relate to some of those points. I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you in a month's time. Take care, mate. See you soon.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Thank you.